Our lawmakers in North Carolina have reached out to the university system and wanted us to provide them with information, which we did. We went down and testified before the Senate Finance Committee. The Senate bill in North Carolina, which Senator Rucho was pushing, which was a very, very dramatic bill in the sense of dramatically changing how North Carolina raises taxes, would have moved North Carolina's tax system away from taxing income to taxing consumption or spending. And the philosophy behind that was that if you want to generate more income, you tax it less. You got to make up, however, that revenue some way. State has to do some things, so you're going to tax spending. When you look at the literature on whether that kind of system would encourage economic growth, you get very divergent results.
I think what they took away from your testimony was that Tennessee model worked because of their tax policies, and that we have to cut the tax rate in order to have economic growth.
Well, no, I never said that. You might look at the tape. I mean, I think we have there are four of us there, and I think one thing we did agree on is that lower rates, broader base, and simpler tax systems better. But I was very cautious in talking about what tax changes might do to economic growth. I never said that, no, we just cut taxes and boom, the economy's going to skyrocket. Never said that. Tennessee has been one of the states that is in the top tier of states that has improved during the recession. And I would argue it's primarily due to the auto industry. Tennessee has auto assembly plants. The auto industry, of course, took a big hit during the recession, but it's come back very, very strongly, in part due to government assistance. And Tennessee is a state that I think has benefited from that.
So it's federal and state governments investing in the auto industry?
Well, I mean, what I was alluding to with the auto industry comeback is the federal government went in and helped Chrysler and went in and helped General Motors specifically.
Okay, so that's good to clarify, because I think there was an assumption made by the lawmakers that it had everything to do with the tax policy.
Well, and again, the issue here, and this is the scientist in me coming out, the issue here, and when you're looking at whatever factor you're focused on, economic growth, you can find relationships between, let's say, taxes and economic growth, but what you have to worry about, are there other factors that might be overriding them, that when you account for those other factors, the relationship between tax and economic growth goes away. So the point being that there are lots of things that affect a state's economic growth. And when you look at studies that are done well, state tax policy is important, but it's not, by far not the dominant factor differentiating between high growth and low growth states. And then secondly, when you look at the impact of different kinds of tax changes, like going from an income-based tax system to a consumption-based tax system, you do not get consistent results.
What would be the thing that you would sort of emphasize?
In terms of taxes?
Taxes and the budget, like, you know, in terms, looking at how do we have economic growth? So what do you think would help?
Well, let me take the tax part first.
Sure.
Economists generally like taxes that are non-intrusive. That is to say, we like taxes that raise needed revenue, but where the rates are small or low, but the base is very broad. So you're taxing a large range of economic activity, but you're not taxing each piece very much, so that taxes don't influence what people are doing, and that are simple. So my advice would be to and I've stated this, to our lawmakers, is if we could move in that direction, I think that would be beneficial for lots of reasons. It might help economic growth a little bit. Again, I don't think that's a silver bullet, but I think it would be good for other reasons, just in terms of transparency, in terms of people making decisions on how to spend their money, how to invest their money. You're inevitably going to have winners and losers. There's no way around that. And I think that needs to be accounted for. And I think one of the things that many were worried about with respect to the major tax proposal that now looks to be shelved, that was discussed in the North Carolina Senate, was what would those changes mean for households at different income levels. And if you go away from a tax system that taxes income to one that taxes spending, almost by definition you're going to hit lower income households more, because lower income households spend a higher proportion of their income than do higher income households. And that's not to say you don't want to move in that direction, but I think you want to have some safeguards built in terms of things like rebates or earned income tax credit or something like that to cushion the blow, if you will, for lower income households as you're moving away from a more complicated system to a simpler system.
In terms of the original Senate bill sponsored by Senator Rucho, that I guess has been scrapped for the time being. So you were saying that was dramatic, and the ones that are being considered right now are more moderate, right?
In terms of just their overall changes, yes. Yes.
And in terms of just economic growth, you don't think that these policies are necessarily going to end up in economic growth?
I don't think, the jury is out, yes. So I would not say that these are going to be policies, tax changes that are going to result in North Carolina's economy because of that dramatically increase in its rate of economic growth. I'm actually on record as thinking North Carolina is going to enjoy much more rapid economic growth in the next couple of years, but I think it'll be for other reasons other than tax changes.
And there are other reasons?
Well, several. We are enjoying, and the nation's enjoying a manufacturing renaissance. And North Carolina is still much more of a manufacturing state than the rest of the country. Secondly, especially in our urban areas, we look very attractive for business expansion because we do have a large number of graduates coming out of colleges. In fact, the rate of increase of college graduates in our North Carolina urban areas has far exceeded that in the nation. That's a second reason. Construction, which took a big hit in North Carolina, has not kept up with new household formation, and the gap there again is much greater than the nation, so I think we're going to see a boom in construction. And then lastly, we traditionally, for several decades before the recession, were one of the states that retirees wanted to move to. That retiree influx fueled a lot of economic growth because retirees bring their pension, they bring their Social Security checks, they bring Medicare expenditures. That influx slowed down dramatically during the recession because of the housing bust and retiree having trouble, for example, maybe selling their home in Ohio. Now that the housing market's coming back, sales are improved, I think we'll start to see that influx. So those are the four reasons I think North Carolina is going to actually see a dramatic upturn in economic activity in the next 4 or 5 years.
So it seems like that's a more holistic view of economic growth, because the debate that I've been privy to, that I'm in the General Assembly, has been so focused on how lowering the tax rate will attract businesses necessarily.
Right.
As if there's a very direct correlation. I mean, is that?
Well, again, I already mentioned this.
Think,
I think that the literature indicates that if there is a correlation, it's small. And secondly, when you start getting into specific types of taxes, potential changes in taxes, like going from an income-based tax to a consumption-based tax, the literature is not consistent on whether that actually helps economic growth or harms economic growth.
And so if you were the economic...
I'm an empirical person. I mean, I look at these issues in terms of, well, you may have a hypothesis, you may have a thought that this is going to help, but let's look and see, do we have substantiation of that in studies and analysis?
But in terms of the connection between education and economic growth, is there literature that substantiates that?
Yeah, I think that's much stronger, right? I think that, I mean, you can see that in many ways. States that have higher percentage of the college graduates have had lower unemployment rates. If you look at individuals, same thing. If you look at the metro areas of North Carolina, you look at where we are, the Research Triangle so-called, you look at the Triad, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, you look at Charlotte, and you even throw in Asheville and maybe Wilmington, which are much smaller cities. Those areas, of course, were hit by the recession. There's virtually no place in the country that wasn't hit by the recession, but they have come back, and they're actually coming back at rates faster than economic growth in the nation. So the urban sections of North Carolina actually have been doing well even with the recession, and they've been doing very well over, say, several decades. It's really the rural areas of North Carolina that are having the big problems, and that's because the fundamental economic structure of those areas has been dramatically altered. It used to be that rural North Carolina was supported by agriculture. It was supported, and within agriculture, very importantly, by tobacco. It was also supported by textile businesses. The textile industry liked to locate in small towns, small rural towns, and by furniture, both the forestry part and the production part. And all of those industries in North Carolina have dramatically downsized for various reasons over the last 3 decades. And a lot of these rural areas have just not found what they can do next. And one of their problems is that educational attainment in those rural areas is very, very low. People in those areas who live there don't have college degrees. In fact, there's a sizable percentage that don't have high school degrees. And the best and the brightest students go away to the universities and never come back. So that, in my mind, is the big issue, economic development issue in North Carolina. It's not so much with the urban areas, which are growing, but it's what to do about our rural areas.
Do you like the bills proposed by the House or the 2 versions in the Senate?
I like aspects, and then nothing is going to be perfect for any individual. The bill that the House passed and the bill that probably the Senate will pass as of today, I don't think they passed it yet, are much more modest than the bill we were talking about, the massive bill in the Senate. They will reduce tax rates. They will make some modest changes on expanding the base for the sales tax. And one of the problems with the sales tax, and I'm sure you've heard this in other states, is the sales tax in most states was developed in the 1930s. When what was it that people bought? Well, they bought hard goods. They bought desks, and they bought vehicles, and they bought furniture, and so that's what that tax is based on. Now, of course, we have a consumption pattern where people actually spend more on services, health care, personal care, lawyer services, than they do on products. And yet the North Carolina sales tax and many sales taxes in the state has not expanded the base. So that's a problem. What that's meant for North Carolina is periodically North Carolina's had to increase the sales tax rate on that much smaller base. I think that moving to a broader sales tax base makes sense, lowering the rate, and then if you do have some problems with certain groups of people, primarily low-income people, ending up paying more than they did under our old system, then have some kind of a rebate built in for them.
Mm-hmm. But you think that rebate should be built in now?
I think that should be built in at least initially. I mean, it may want to be re-examined somewhere down the road, but yeah, I think that's, well, let me just put it, if that is a concern, that is a way of addressing that concern.